What's up, everybody? Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. I'm Noah Schreckbein here every single Monday through Friday. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk or anywhere you get your podcasts. And today, I'm joined by my right-hand man, Stephen Thompson. Stephen, it was an eventful week at Steelers minicamp, helmets and shorts. How'd you like your time at UPMC Rooney Sports Complex?
I loved it. It was great, getting in the facility, seeing the full team in action for the first time. OTAs, you can only learn so much without the full team there, but definitely minicamp gave us more of an insight into what the full Steelers team will look like when the regular season begins this fall.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it provided enough insight for this long, dreadful gap that we're about to take. But that's what we're going to dive into. Some guys that impressed us during minicamp this past week. I'll let you go first. Who's on your list of guys that stood out to you last week down in the South Side?
Yeah, so kind of at the top of my list is Zach Gentry, Gentry. He is, big body tight end. I think at a time when the Steelers are going through a transition at the quarterback position, Zach Gentry's kind of a security blanket for a lot of the quarterbacks. Mitch and Mason, and even Kenny Kenny, who took some reps with that first team yesterday, in particular during the 2-minute drill and some 7-on-7 stuff. But just a guy who's that big and that experienced. He gets open really well. He's just really easy to find. He's hard to miss when if you're a quarterback looking at a new offense and receivers that you don't know. And so yeah, I thought he really stood out. He made some nice catches, particularly this week, working with that first and second team offense.
Yeah, no doubt. Gentry's, 6'8", took him a couple of years to find his body. I think it was cool when we talked to him in the locker room. He was like, yeah, like it took a while to adjust to how big I am and how to use my body. But, he looks fluid. Him and Pat should be a good duo. I think it took 4 years, but all props to the Steelers coaching staff for giving that time to develop there. Who else stood out on your list?
Another tight end, Connor Heyward. We talked yesterday about this, but I think the fact that he fell so far in the draft was because he didn't really have a position. Well, I think it was more about the way people talked about him. You heard everything from him was H-back, H-back, H-back. But he's a true tight end. He's not particularly big, but he has great feet. He's pretty agile. He can move really well. And then just catches balls, I think he's developed a really nice rapport, particularly with Kenny Pickett. You saw them working together a lot. They were kind of on the same offensive team together. Their lockers are right in the same corner in the locker room. So, and we saw him make, really spectacular, one-handed diving catch in the end zone the other day during the 2-minute drill. I really like him. I love the way that he can move. I love his hands, and I love the rapport that he and the relationship that he's building with Kenny Pickett in particular.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he wears a donkey shirt for the next week because he got up and celebrated that one-handed snag, which was beautiful. He's made a lot of catches, especially for dude who's 5'10". He does not play to his size whatsoever. I think that's his biggest downfall, but he'll learn to get through it. Who's next?
Another offensive player, Gunnar Olszewski. Another guy that we talked about a lot this week in the OTAs. Man just gets open. And makes catches. You can only put so much stock into plays where everyone's in helmets and shorts, but he has such good feet and runs great routes, good hands. And it's interesting to watch him work like that because you watched him in New England, and all he was for the most part was a punt and kick returner, a special teams guy, an all-pro at those positions, but still, he has 9 career receptions, and the Steelers are bringing him in to be a wide receiver, and he has more than proved that he is up to the task. I think through these past few weeks, he just gets open, and that's kind of all you can ask of a guy who's playing receivers. So I really liked him. I thought he made some really nice plays. And I think they're going to start asking more of him. When you get into training camp and stuff like that, when you start to figure out teams and all of that, first team, second team, third team, he's going to keep moving up because of his ability to just make plays against whoever's lining up against him.
Yeah, no doubt. I have a whole notepad that's just filled with Gunner is open. Gunner's open again. Gunner's wide open. It's like, and somebody's explained to me, like, when pads come on, it affects, leverage and trajectory and the whole, I don't know. I'm not an X's and O's guy, but they said that, we have to see what he looks like in pads. Like you said, if you're open, you're open. I don't care who's behind you.
Right, if no one's touching you, it doesn't matter. They can't tackle you. Like, if they're not within 5 yards of you, they can't tackle you. So it doesn't matter if they're in pads or not.
Yep. He looks, I think, the most impressive so far at camp. All right. Who else do you got on your list there?
Cam Sutton. I was really impressed with. So, Minka been kind of in the background of these practices so far. There's kind of an open hole at safety and in the defensive backfield as a whole. So Cam has, I thought, really been one of those guys who stepped up and taken on a leadership role, but then also is just playing well, when they do team drills and stuff like that. So he's, I think, going to be really important during these next few during training camp, depending on how the Minka situation plays out. He's a veteran. It was really interesting talking to him yesterday about that situation and like how he's tried to fill that Minka role without really filling that Minka role. Everyone's kind of not walking on eggshells about it, but I think a little cautious about what they say. So, Minka's there. He's participating. He's, involved with kind of planning and the mental side of stuff, but he's not playing. He's not repping with that first team defense. So I think Cam has really felt a responsibility to fill that role in some ways, to be that on-field leader, a vocal leader, a kind of quarterback of the defense per se from the secondary. You can see a lot. And I think another thing they talked about a lot, it wasn't just Cam, but it was Mike Tomlin and all the other DBs were talking about how you need to be versatile at this point in the year. And Cam, I think, has embraced that. He's really ready to fill whatever need the Steelers have for him. And Minka's going to – I'd have to believe that Minka's going to get re-signed or extended. But for right now, Cam is kind of playing as if Minka's not there and saying, okay, if let's prepare as if we don't have him and let's be ready, and that's only going to help us.
Yeah, I agree. The Cam, I remember back in the day, my first year in the locker room, Cam was second-year guy, and already every time I talked to him, I was like, this guy's been in the league for 10 years. At least he acts like he's been in the league for 10 years. He's probably the biggest leader and the most overlooked leader on that defense. I agree with that 100%. He's going to be key to them definitely moving forward. And then I think you got one more, right? You got one more on that list?
Yeah, and this is why, the fact that I only chose 2 wide receivers on this list is pretty incredible because I am fascinated by that position group. But Anthony Miller, I thought, really stood out this week. This is a guy who was a second-round pick coming out of college, spent a few years with the Bears, and kind of fizzled out. Didn't exactly live up to his potential, but he knows he's got to fight like hell to stay in this league, and he said in no uncertain terms that he is ready to do whatever he has to do to stick around in professional football, whether that's special teams or whatever. He wants to be a receiver. I think he's a really good receiver. He made some really nice plays this week just with his agility and stuff like that. He's also big. He's much bigger than my impression of him was. But I really liked the way that he was competing. I loved his attitude and, in addition to the stuff that he was actually doing on the field. So that receiver group is really young, really new. Your most experienced guy, not most experienced, but, experienced with the Steelers in that system is like Chase Claypool. So Anthony is going to be one of, 3, 4, 5, 6 receivers that are not only competing for, snaps and time in, that receiver rotation, but also to be a leader, to be someone who steps up and kind of takes control of that position group. So I was really, really interested watching him, and I thought he had a really good week of practice.
I think what stood out the most about Anthony Miller this week, outside of like last year, he looked real shredded. This year, he looks ridiculously shredded. Was we watched Frispin Jackson yell at everyone all day long for 3 weeks, no breaks. And every time you talk to Anthony Miller, it seemed to be positive feedback. And in my eyes, if you're yelling at Deontay Johnson, but telling Anthony Miller he's doing something right, Anthony Miller's looking good. And right. I think that's all the affirmation I needed from anybody about whether or not Anthony's a guy. They'll keep 6 guys. I think yesterday we were talking and we thought it was 5. It's 6. Miles Boykin, Anthony Miller, Cody White seem to be the guys that I think will fight for that last spot. And Anthony Miller seems like a guy who can make some splash, add some potential if he is that last guy. All right. My list is a little bit more old. It's more veterans, I guess, outside of one guy. No, I take that back. It's not. That was a total lie on my part. But it does have some veterans in it. We're going to start with Akhello Witherspoon. I think the biggest thing that stood out about Akhello is I expected him to be the cornerback 2, the guy that rotated with Levi Wallace, if not, Cam Sutton moving inside and Witherspoon and Wallace being the outside guys. But I expected Wallace to have a pretty big role on this defense. Witherspoon rarely comes off the field when they're running the first team, and I thought that showed how much confidence they have in him and how much potential they see in him here in year 2. I also think I talked to him in a scrum, and he talked a lot about, what he's looking to do and how comfortable he feels in this defense. But then I talked to him one-on-one, and he said, I have so much swagger with this team because they let me go through my downs. They let me find myself here in this team, be me, go through my struggles, and find the other side. And now that he's on the other side, he says he's like, I can be myself, and like nobody cares because they've seen me overcome things. And that adds a lot of confidence to guys. And I think he just looks very smooth out there. I think he looks like a leader. He's yelling all the time. Those things stand out for a guy who needs to, not even needs to, but just has an opportunity to really be a star at that position. And he's still very young.
Right. And, he's a guy who seems pretty safely in the roster, of course, because he's rapping with the first team and stuff like that. Like he could be comfortable in that role, just staying in that role, keeping it that limited. But he is clearly trying to take on a bigger role. He wants to be a leader. He wants to be a first team guy every down, and I think that's impressive. And I don't think that's uncommon. I think everyone wants to do that. But, for a guy like him, whose name isn't necessarily, known in every household who watches the Steelers, I think that's really important and really interesting.
Yeah, Witherspoon was a dude who stood out. Staying with the defense, Miles Jack. It's not even what he did. Like, it's very hard to take away inside linebackers at this point in minicamp. Like Brian Flores said it himself. He's like, I can't judge a linebacker off of helmets and shorts because when a 300-pound lineman's running at them, then we know how good that linebacker is. What stood out to me about Miles Jack is every single time somebody talked about him in the locker room, they're like, oh my gosh, Miles Jack is ridiculous. He's so good. He's a leader. He's a dog. He's out here making plays. And I'm just like, all right, like that's cool, because a lot of guys say that, but people said that with gusto. Like it was the same way that people talked about Brian Flores and his immediate impact to this defense. I think that's huge because I was here last year with the Joe Schobert incident, and people had good things to say, but nobody was like, yeah, this guy is a star. And everybody's like, dude, Miles Jack could really make an impact on this defense. And I think that's something that once pads do come on, we will see, how different him and Devin Bush are because of what he can do in the middle of the field.
Right. And we know he's talented. Like he's a former first-round pick, I think.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Former first-round pick, starred for the Jacksonville Jaguars, was a key player on their best team in ever, probably.
Yeah, maybe
probably. We know about the physical traits and the stuff that he can do on the football field, but I was so impressed by his knowledge. He is kind of like an encyclopedia of like everything that he's done in the NFL. Like he can recall it so quickly. I loved like hearing from him in the locker room. So that's what I was most impressed by. And I'm glad you brought him up because I think he's a really impressive player too.
Yeah. Miles Jack is a dude that could change this defense for sure. And it's good because it's veterans taking leadership roles that are young. Like he's only 26 years old. There's a lot of room there for improvement. I like to see that. Next is George Pickens, and I you can't keep him off this list. It's ridiculous what this guy can do. And I get it's shorts and helmets, but I felt like every single day we were talking about how incredible George Pickens looked on the football field. And that might change, but I think you were the one that pointed out the dude's all legs. Like his legs literally touch his neck and his arms touch his feet. It's ridiculous, but that's the perfect mold for a wide receiver. The guy goes up and grabs balls that he literally levitates in the air to grab. I've said it 4 or 5 times now on this podcast that the guy is already, in my eyes, going to be a star. And I don't think there's any hiding that. What George Pickens could do once the fans get to see him, like, they're going to lose their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I love the most about watching him work this week, and kind of at OTAs too, but coaches get after him. They're not going to tolerate anything less than his absolute best. Like particularly Mike Tomlin, he could catch a 70-yard touchdown, beat his man by 18 yards or whatever, and Mike Tomlin would still find something to critique about him. And I like that. I don't know. Like he's a talented guy, and that's obviously you love that, but I think they are so focused on making sure that this guy isn't just athletic and doesn't just thrive off of his talent. They're going to make sure that he is a smart football player too, that knows everything about the game.
Yeah, George Pickens, and that wide receiver core, like you said, it was so fascinating to watch these guys, especially because a year ago, I know you weren't on the field, but a year ago, you were watching guys like Ray McLeod, trying to be impressed by Ray McLeod. And like, you were like, oh, Juju looks really physical. Now it's just like, I'm pretty sure every single one of these guys could be the fastest guy on the football field, the most athletic guy on the football field. And if you threw it up, chances are 6'4" Chase Claypool and 6'3" George Pickens. So one of them is going to snag the football. So it's pretty ridiculous. Going back to defense to finish this one off, I got 2 more. Tuzar Skipper came in here real late, 3rd stint with the Steelers, and immediately, I know that he doesn't really have a ton to work against, but in my eyes is already the best outside linebacker outside of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. He looks bigger. He looks faster. He looks smoother. I mean, you see him walking around and you're like, yeah, that guy is noticeably ginormous. And for a guy who, I mean, he's a preseason All-Pro 3 years ago. He's a guy who's come in here and done his thing. They just need to see it in the regular season, but fans are excited about him. I would be excited about him. I think he has a real opportunity to play this season for this team. And if he stays healthy, I think he's their best option right now.
Yeah, and a guy with experience in the system and stuff like that. So a guy that I think the Steelers would feel really comfortable just plugging in almost right away. So he might not start, but certainly as a rotation player, it was a good depth piece to add for I think that was one of Omar Khan's first moves as GM, right? So yeah. I mean, pretty good start, I'd say.
Wow, yeah, Tuzar Skipper, one of the first moves from Omar Khan. That's actually that's a good way to start. I don't think fans put that into perspective there. I don't think I put that into perspective there. And then to finish off my list is a pair of defensive linemen. Isaiah Loudermilk just looks beefy. Last year, he looked skinny. He looks small for a dude who's 6'8". You're just worried about him. I think the coolest thing on top of that is that we've been talking all week about like, what would Isaiah Loudermilk be if he wasn't a football player? Because the dude's got the long hair. He wears like the tie-dye shirts, just in my opinion, he's a drummer. Went up to him. He's like, yeah, I grew up in a farm town in Kansas. I would not be a farm boy. No way. He's like, I played the ukulele, if that counts. Like, that's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. But on top of that, he looks beefed up. He's taken first-team reps because Cam Heyward missed the last 2 days of minicamp. He just looks like a dude who's ready to take that second-year leap. He looks like a guy who's somewhat filling into the potential that the Steelers saw in him to make that move when they traded up to get him in the draft last year. And, if it works out, I think he fixes a lot of the defensive line because last year their problem was there was no depth. It was Cam Heyward, Tyson Alualu, Stephon Tuitt, and when Tyson went down, Stephon didn't play, and Chris Wormley had to start. It was just a bunch of mix and match nobodies in the middle of the defensive line. Now they have guys that they can rely on, which bounces off of this next guy and this final guy, Monty Adams, who looks just as smooth as he looked last year when he came into Pittsburgh real late in the season, joined week 13, jumped into a starting role immediately, filled that well. I think he looks pretty much the same. And I think those two guys can really solidify the fact that the Steelers defensive line is ready to take a step in the right direction this year.
Yeah, and they will need to. No Stephon Tuitt. Again, I know it's the second year of no Stephon Tuitt, but now they're prepared for it. I think that's something that that everyone's talking about is, it sucks to lose Stephon Tuitt, but when you have a little bit of run-up time to it, it gets a little bit easier. You can kind of figure out where the pieces all fall without, having to do that. You can do that in practice as opposed to having to do it in live game action or during a game week.
Yeah. Steelers have a long gap. It's going to get real boring. But it's all right. July 6th, 26th, we're there. Hopefully somebody shows up in a helicopter. Shout out to the AB years. If not, don't worry. We'll have plenty of coverage. Find us on allsteelers.com and check both of us out on Twitter. We'll be back on Monday. Enjoy your weekend.